They marked my garden like it was a crime scene. Bright yellow signs hammered into the soil where my dad once taught me to plant tomatoes right through the rows I'd cared for every summer since I was a kid. And when I opened the certified letter that demanded $8,500 in fines, I realized this wasn't just harassment. It was an attempt to steal my home with paperwork. My name's Daniel Harris, and I've lived in the same house in Meadowbrook for over 2 decades. My dad bought this place back in the 90s before any homeowner association ever existed here. This wasn't just a house, it was family history. A piece of my childhood wrapped up in garden soil and mailbox repairs. That Tuesday morning felt like any other until I saw 2 guys in matching polo shirts hammering a stake into my lawn. The sign read Buffer Zone Property, HOA Jurisdiction. I thought it had to be a mistake. Wrong address, wrong street something. "Excuse me, you're putting that on my private property," I said, trying to keep my cool. The older one, Jim, didn't even look up. "This is HOA Buffer Zone Territory Updated Boundaries," he muttered like he was reading a script. I told him I wasn't part of any HOA. Never had been. He gave me that look like I was lying or just too dumb to understand. President Whitman expanded coverage for community protection, he said. That name, President Whitman, would haunt me. When I opened my mailbox there, it was a thick envelope with a legal notice inside, signed by Paige Whitman, president of Meadowbrook HOA. Persistent covenant violations and unauthorized residential use of buffer zone. They were demanding thousands of dollars. I stared at it like it might change if I read it again. Violations. For what? Breathing their precious HOA air. It felt like getting a speeding ticket while parked in my own garage. I pulled out my deed, waved it in their faces, but Jim just radioed in reporting the buffer zone resident is being non-compliant. His buddy kept snapping photos of my roses like they were evidence in some FBI case. Compliance violations, he said, pointing at my garden. Unauthorized landscaping modifications. My tomatoes. My roses. My dad's lessons in the dirt. Unauthorized. When they dropped orange cones across my driveway, my own driveway, I realized this wasn't just a mix-up. They were staging a takeover. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. Mrs. Henderson looked at me like I was some criminal, and standing there with fake boundaries drawn across my property, I felt like the ground itself had been stolen from under my feet. That night, I spread every document I could find across my kitchen table. Property surveys, county maps. Deeds, my life became a war room of paperwork. I discovered something sickening. The Meadowbrook HOA was chartered in 2004, 6 years after my house was built. Their original coverage included only 37 homes on Elm Circle, nowhere near mine. But every few years, Paige filed amendments, fake expansions stretching the boundaries like a rubber band. Missing signatures, forged surveys, fabricated coordinates. By the latest filing, she'd convinced herself she owned half the zip code. It wasn't just me. Families had been forced out like the Martinezes who sold their home after 2 years of threats. Their kids had asked why strangers kept photographing their house. Maria Martinez told me, "We just couldn't fight anymore." And Sarah Johnson, she broke down when I showed her the P.O. box that Golden Shield Insurance operated out of. She and her husband had been paying $200 a month to protect themselves from HOA violations Paige herself invented. That's when it hit me this wasn't neighborly drama. This was organized crime. But even knowing that, the pressure wore me down. Flyers appeared on every doorstep labeling me the dangerous neighbor threatening property values. My inbox filled with mass emails accusing me of undermining the community. Parents pulled their kids away when they saw me. The neighborhood I'd lived in for 20 years turned into a surveillance state. People patrolled past my home with clipboards, cameras flashing at my garbage bins, my sprinkler angles, my shed door. One night around 3 in the morning, sitting in the glow of my desk lamp, I broke. I stared at the evidence scattered in front of me and whispered to myself, "What if I'm wrong? What if I've misunderstood the law? What if she really does have authority over my land?" My chest felt heavy. Maybe the smarter move was to pay the fine, sell the house, start over somewhere without orange cones and fake surveys. I was so tired, so damn tired. But then I thought about Sarah Johnson. Her daughter's college fund drained to pay for Paige's mailbox scam. The tears in her eyes when she realized she'd been robbed. That image snapped me out of it. If I gave up, Paige would keep bleeding families dry. Maybe I couldn't save everyone, but I sure as hell wasn't going to let her take me down without a fight. That's when Mark Bennett stepped in. He was a neighbor I'd barely spoken to before an attorney. He cornered me by my mailbox, speaking in a low voice. "This whole thing stinks. None of their documents hold up legally. You're not even part of their HOA. You're the only one who can challenge this in court." He explained something called a quiet title action. It meant I could force the court to determine true ownership of the land, wiping out Paige's fabricated authority in one move. So I prepared. Every night I built my case like a fortress. Zoning maps, forged amendments, testimonies from victims, proof of Golden Shield's fraud, even tax evasion claims where Paige filed exemptions on land she didn't own. I made copies, backups, charts that even a tired judge couldn't ignore. And when court day came, I walked in with one folder, months of work boiled down to a single shot at justice. Paige arrived like a queen. Perfect suit, expensive lawyer, an entourage of neighbors glaring at me from the gallery. She smiled as if she'd already won. Her opening speech was polished. She spoke of community values, protecting investments, keeping neighborhoods safe. The judge nodded, impressed. At that moment, I felt like a fool with a flimsy folder about to get crushed under years of manipulation. But then I stood up. "Your Honor," I said, "before we talk about alleged violations, shouldn't we first decide whether this HOA even has legal authority over my property?" That was the pivot. I wasn't the defendant anymore. I was the prosecutor. I laid it all out, county zoning maps proving my property predated their HOA. Side-by-side comparisons showing forged coordinates. A timeline of expansions riddled with missing signatures. Photos of Golden Shield's so-called headquarters, a rusty P.O. box in a strip mall. Receipts from families who'd been extorted. Tax documents showing Paige claiming government benefits on stolen land. The courtroom shifted. Neighbors leaned forward whispering. Sarah Johnson gasped when she recognized the insurance letters I displayed. "We've been paying them," she cried out. The judge's face darkened. Paige's lawyer fumbled. And Paige herself, her confident smirk cracked into a twitch of panic. I kept pressing. Golden Shield isn't a company, it's a scam. These amendments aren't expansions, they're forgeries. This HOA has no authority over me over anyone beyond Elm Circle. Each word felt like a hammer striking her empire. The judge called a recess to contact the district attorney. Suddenly, this wasn't a civil case anymore, it was a criminal investigation. Fraud, theft, insurance scams, tax evasion. Paige's whole world unraveled in minutes. Her board members started resigning by email right there in the courthouse lobby. Neighbors shouted demanding refunds. Someone ripped up a violation notice and tossed the pieces in the air like confetti. By the time the judge returned, Paige wasn't President Whitman anymore. She was a defendant under investigation for multiple felonies. The HOA was dissolved, its accounts frozen. Every fake regulation she'd forced on families declared invalid. I caught her in the parking garage afterward, surrounded by reporters firing questions she couldn't answer. Her suit was wrinkled, her eyes red. She looked straight at me and hissed, "You had no right to destroy what I built." I looked her dead in the eye. "You built it on stolen land with stolen money." I just proved it. That was it. Paige shuffled to her car cameras, flashing her empire of fear reduced to ashes. I stood there exhausted but steady. No orange cones, no fake signs, no patrols left on my lawn. Just the quiet of a neighborhood finally free. And here's the truth, I walked away with fake authority only survives if people stay silent.